The 2025 NHL Draft is now just a couple of weeks away, and with almost every pick determined outside of the last two, with Edmonton and Florida still playing in the Cup Finals, I wanted to share my mock draft and talk about where I see each top prospect going. Now, with this draft, it's half about fit, half about just how good I see the player as being. I'll explain each of them as they come. So without wasting any more time, let's go with pick number 1, which is the New York Islanders. I have them selecting Matthew Schaefer. This is a no-brainer to me. Matthew Schaefer is the top prospect in the draft. He instantly becomes a number 1 D of the future for the Islanders. He's got good size at 6'2" and 183 pounds, and he's going to be a great two-way defenseman in the NHL. This past season, he had 22 points in 17 games, but it was on the international stage where he really showed that he is going to be a great defenseman at the next level. Now moving on to pick number 2, it's the San Jose Sharks, and I have them selecting Michael Misa. Now, Michael Misa isn't exactly a positional need for the Sharks. They already have great forwards, but it's simply too much talent to pass up on. He's a 6'1", 185-pound centerman who had 134 points in 65 games this past year. Misa is a highly skilled prospect, and he just becomes the next in line to a ridiculously stacked forward core in San Jose. He had exceptional status in the CHL, and he showed why. He's just got all the tools to be an excellent first-line player of the future. Having a trio of himself, Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, as well as other complementary pieces around is just going to be so incredible to watch, and it should make Sharks fans extremely excited for the future. Now, going on to pick number 3, I have the Chicago Blackhawks taking James Hagens. Now, Hagens stands at 5'11" and 176 pounds. He's a little bit smaller than the previous guys mentioned, but he was excellent at the college level this year. He had 37 points in 37 games with Boston College, and he's got that skill level that shows that he can play with Connor Bedard one day. The Blackhawks desperately need some talent to surround Bedard with, and although I think they're going to address that in free agency this year with some NHL-ready players, Hagens has that potential to one day be a line mate to play on Bedard's wing, and those two would just be such a dynamic duo. The Blackhawks need more high-end forward prospects. They've already got great defensemen coming up, and Hagens is the highest ceiling available player at this position. The World Juniors, he was excellent. He had 9 points in 7 games with the USA, and he helped them win the gold medal. In 2 years, he could step in and instantly fill a top 6 role. At 4th overall, I have the Utah Mammoths selecting Porter Martone. Now, Martone is a bigger prospect, and that's exactly what Utah's been looking for. He's 6'3" and 207 pounds, and he has a skill to match. He had 98 points in 57 games with Brampton, and the Mammoth, who have talked about wanting to add size to their forward core, do that while also taking what I believe to be the best player available at this position. They get their guy with a blend of skill and size, and he should really complement players like Clayton Keller and Logan Cooley extremely well. Now at 5th overall, I have the Nashville Predators taking Anton Frondell. Now Frondell was excellent in the Allsvenskan this year. He had 25 points in 29 games, and he fills a need for Nashville, which is a high-end center. Now, he's a very creative and skillful player, but he's also good in his own end. He's a good two-way prospect at this point, and while I don't think he's going to be a Selke candidate at the NHL level, he could approach that point-per-game level while also being capable in his own end. And I think a great player for him to learn from would be Filip Forsberg. Now, I see Frondell as a center, Forsberg obviously plays the wing, but they're both incredibly skilled forwards, and I don't think that Frondell will be putting up Forsberg-type point totals at the NHL level, but he can learn some of the skills and tricks that have helped Forsberg become so elite. Now at number 6, I have the Flyers taking Caleb Desnoyers, and I think they would sprint to the podium. Desnoyers is a great center prospect. He stands at 6'2" and 172 pounds, and he also had a ridiculously high point total this year with 84 points in 56 games with Moncton of the QMJHL. Now Philadelphia also needs a high-end center of the future, and I think Desnoyers could be that number 1 center if all things pan out. You pair him with someone like Jet Luchenko, and that's a solid 1-2 punch if both players are able to reach their potential. And at this number 6 position, I think he is also the best player available, so it really should be a no-brainer for the Flyers. Now at number 7, I have the Boston Bruins going off the board slightly and selecting Brady Martin. Now Martin isn't the biggest player, he's 6 foot even and 174 pounds, but he is by far the most physical player in the draft. He had 72 points in 57 games with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, and as I said, he just loves to hit everything in his pass, which is exactly the type of play style the Boston Bruins love. He may not have the high-end ceiling as a couple of the other prospects following him in this draft, but he is an incredibly hard type of player to find in free agency or on the trade market. They're rare, you almost always have to draft them, and I think the Bruins would be a perfect fit for him, and he would be a perfect fit for them as well. Now at number 8, I have the Seattle Kraken taking Radim Mrtka. Mrtka is a massive right shot defenseman, which of course every team needs. He stands at 6'6" and 216 pounds, but he also has an offensive side to his game that is very underrated. He had 35 points in 43 games with the Seattle Thunderbirds, and those point totals should show that he is a two-way defender. He's capable of putting up points, and I still think there is some untapped offensive potential there. He's a very good skater, and that's not just for his size. He's a very good skater in general, and if all things pan out, he could be a top pair defenseman one day, although I would say a more conservative projection would probably be that he can be a top 4 D-man of the future for the Kraken. Now at number 9, also jumping up a little bit, I have the Buffalo Sabres taking Logan Hensler from the NCAA. Now Hensler isn't the best player available here, but he fills a positional need for Buffalo, which is a right shot defenseman that can transition pucks up to their high skill forwards. He's 6'2" and 196 pounds, and this year with Wisconsin in the NCAA, he had 12 points in 32 games. Buffalo has so many high-end forward prospects and young players in the lineup already that I just think they need to go for a defenseman here, and especially one on the right side when you look at guys like Power, Dahlin, and Byram who are all there right now. They need to address the other side with some actual right-handed shot defensemen as well. Not just a lefty that can play the right side, but a right-handed on his natural side who has the potential to play a top 4 role one day. Now at number 10, I have the Anaheim Ducks taking Victor Eklund. Now, this may shock some people, and I don't think it's the most likely just looking at Pat Verbeek and the way he likes to build his teams, with size being very, very, very high on his necessity list. So this is more where I just say the talent is too much to pass up on. Eklund is 5'11" and 161 pounds, plays the left wing, but is a right shot. In the Allsvenskan this year, he played on a team with Frondell. He had 31 points in 42 games. And if all pans out, he should be a high point producing offensive winger at the NHL level. Again, it's the Ducks, so do I totally see them taking a 5'11" forward at 10th overall? Maybe not the most likely, but this is where my bias kind of takes over and I say he's just too talented to pass up on. Now at number 11, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins taking a swing on Roger McQueen. Now McQueen is probably the most intriguing player in the draft because he has so much skill and he's 6'5" and 192 pounds. He's a very high-end talent if he pans out, and that's with a big asterisk. He had 20 points in 17 WHL games with Brandon this year, but the problem with McQueen is that he is very injury prone. If he is able to play through these injuries and reach his potential without having to miss significant time again, I think he could easily be a top 6 center in the future. But if the injuries prove to be too much or they hinder his development too far, he could also just miss the NHL altogether. But this is the type of swing I see the Pittsburgh Penguins trying to make. A very high-risk, high-reward player, where if it all pans out, he could be one of the best players out of this draft when it's all said and done. Moving on to number 12, I have the New York Rangers taking Jackson Smith. Now, Jackson Smith is one of the most fun players to watch in this draft for me, and he's one of the ones that I have the highest hopes for moving forward. He's 6'3" and 190 pounds as a left shot defenseman, and this season in the WHL with Tri-City, he had 54 points in 68 games. Now, the Rangers could very well trade this pick. They want NHL-ready players who can help them win in their current window, but if they do choose to hold on to this draft pick, I could see them taking Jackson Smith to help add to what is a very lackluster future blue line, especially if they trade someone like K'Andre Miller. And I also think there is a strong case to be made that he is the best player available at this position. Now at number 13, I have the Detroit Red Wings getting a steal with Jake O'Brien. Now O'Brien could very easily be a top 10 prospect in this draft. He's a 6'2" right shot centerman that had 98 points in 66 OHL games this year with Brantford. Now you're probably wondering why I don't have him a little bit higher, and honestly, there's no real good reason outside of the fact that this is just a gut feeling. And I think some of those other players, whether they're filling positional needs or perhaps people just see a higher ceiling with them, I just see O'Brien falling slightly in this draft, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think he is an incredible prospect. Now, Detroit doesn't need a center, but I couldn't stomach putting O'Brien any lower on this mock draft. It's just too much talent for them to pass up at this point, and it makes the idea of trading another prospect they have for current NHL help much easier to swallow. He's a great playmaker who could definitely play a top 6 role in the NHL one day. And for Detroit, I think he would be an excellent addition to that future forward core. At number 14, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets taking Malcolm Spence. Now, Spence is a 6'2", 201-pound left winger from the OHL. He had 73 points in 65 games with Erie. And to me, where Spence really excels is that he has that mix of skill and grit, which we have really seen matter in the playoffs with guys like Sam Bennett just being so effective for the Florida Panthers. He's a very good forechecker, and he can also put up some points. And for a Columbus team that has a bunch of high-skill forwards, I think Spence gives them that secondary element of being able to go to the dirty areas and doing the dirty work to help open up more space for them. Now at number 15, I have the Vancouver Canucks taking Carter Bear from the WHL. Now this season with Everett, Bear had 82 points in 56 games, and he showed that he is an incredibly high productive forward that has skill to put up some great point totals. But the thing with Bear that I love most is that on top of the high skill he has a very high intensity to his game as well. He's constantly hounding pucks, and he plays every shift at 100%, which should be a major green flag for any team looking at drafting him. His offensive skill set is excellent, and I see him really having a great NHL career. I think his skills are very translatable, and I see him as a top 6 forward of the future. Now moving on to the Montreal Canadiens, I have them taking with their first of back-to-back picks, Lyndon Lakovic from the WHL. Now Lakovic is a 6'4", 190-pound left winger who played last season with Moose Jaw. He had 58 points in 47 games, and he has that blend of size and skill that is excellent as a complementary piece in the middle six. Now, the elephant in the room is that Montreal probably wants to trade at least one of these 2 picks for current NHL help and hopefully a top 6 center. But if they don't and they do hold on to them both, I see them taking Lakovic. Now, that changes a little bit if one is picked, and that kind of transitions into their second pick, which I have as Ivan Ryabkin. Now, Ryabkin is a very interesting name because he has so much skill and at one point was talked about as a definite top 5 prospect in this draft. He had a rough year overall. I'm using his USHL stats because that's where he played the majority of his season, and he was pretty successful there. He had 30 points in 27 games with Muskegon, and the thing with Ryabkin is that he has an incredibly high ceiling. He has so much potential, but it's just about getting that consistency and having his motor on at all times. But I think the Habs as a team who've shown interest in Russians, they took Ivan Demidov last year. Maybe they go back-to-back with an Ivan here, and they get a player who has the potential to be a second-line center of the future. It's just about molding him into being an everyday NHLer that not only has the skill, but also the drive to be successful. But for Montreal, at this position in the draft, what you desperately need is a second-line center, and I think Ryabkin is the biggest swing at getting that. Moving on to pick 18, I have the Calgary Flames selecting Colin Potter from the NCAA. Now, Potter is a little bit undersized as well. He's 5'10" and 172 pounds, but he put up a very solid season with Arizona State, getting 22 points in 35 games. With this pick, I just see the Flames taking a swing on someone who has a very high upside. He's a very fast and responsible player, and there's a lot of things to work with within his game. I think he's an extremely intriguing prospect, and if Calgary were to select him at this position, I think it would be a great selection. Moving on to number 19, I have the St. Louis Blues taking Kashawn Atchison. Now, Atchison is a 6'1", 198-pound left shot defenseman who had a great season in the OHL with Barrie. He had 59 points in 64 games, and he's also a very, very physical player. He has that mix of physicality and puck-moving ability that makes him look like he could be a top 4 blue liner of the future if everything works out. For a team like the Blues, I think he is exactly what Doug Armstrong would be looking for, and at number 19, I think you're also getting excellent value with this pick. Now at number 20, back to the Columbus Blue Jackets, I have them taking Blake Fiedler. Now Fiedler is a 6'4", 209-pound right shot defenseman who was good in the WHL this season with Edmonton offensively. He had 33 points in 64 games, but what makes Fiedler more exciting is that he is a great defensive defenseman as well. Now, do I see him ever having the skill set to be a top 5 or 10 player in this draft? Not really, but what I do see is someone who could play a complementary role on the right side with someone like Zach Werenski or Denton Mateychuk down the line. He's never going to be the guy that runs his own pair, but in terms of a defensive defenseman who's smart, sound, and can move pucks up the ice, I think he would be excellent on the right side of a top 4 left shot defenseman who maybe has a little bit more offense in their game. For Columbus, with all the high-end prospects they have, especially in terms of forwards, I think getting a sound right-shot defenseman makes them a more complete team and more of a playoff threat if and when they make it again. Now moving on to number 21, I have the Ottawa Senators selecting Justin Carbonneau from the QMJHL. Now Carbonneau is another high-end forward prospect. He stands at 6'1", 192 pounds, and he had 89 points in 62 Q games this year. For Ottawa, he fills a positional need of a future right winger. The Senators' prospect pool is pretty lackluster, so it's another swing on high upside here, and you hope that one day he could potentially play a second or third line right wing position and put up some decent point totals in the NHL as well. Moving on to number 22, I have the Philadelphia Flyers taking Cam Reed from the OHL. Now Reed is a smaller defenseman. He's 6 foot 174 pounds, but he put up 54 points in 67 games with Kitchener this year. He instantly helped solidify that left side of the blue line for the future, and again, it's a swing on a high upside pick. The Flyers have shown that they're willing to take players who aren't maybe the biggest. You look at a pick like Jet Luchenko recently and someone like Matvei Michkov the year before, and it shows that the Flyers are willing to look at skill rather than size, and it's something that I think would be a smart decision for them to do, especially at this position. I think Cam Reed would be an excellent fit on that Philly blue line. At number 23, I have the Nashville Predators taking Ben Kindle from the WHL. Now, Kindle as well is an extremely high skill right winger for this position. He's 5'10" and 176 pounds, and he was 1 point shy of 100 points in 65 WHL games with Calgary this year. At this point in the draft, I think he is the highest upside that is available, and I just think if you're a team like Nashville where you still want to be competitive for the next couple of years, obviously I don't think they will be, but just take a swing on what I think to be the best player available at this point. Ben Kindle could easily be one of the top prospects looking back in this draft with how extremely skillful he is offensively. And for a team like Nashville, I think he just makes so much sense at this position in the draft. Now at number 24, this would be the biggest riser up to this point in the draft that I have. I have the LA Kings taking Charlie Trethewey. Now Trethewey for a lot of people is a second round pick, but I really value what he brings to the table. He's a 6'2", 196 pound right shot defenseman. And this season he played with the USNTDP team, and he had 20 points in 63 games. Now the point totals aren't going to jump off the board, and that's not an issue to me because Trethewey is someone who plays more of a two-way and more defensive style game at that. He's physical and he plays a shutdown game, and for a team like LA, at this point you're not trying to make the playoffs, you're trying to be successful there. The way to do that is by having these physical players that just are able to clear the front of the net and do things the right way. With LA, you already have the high-end forwards of the future with guys like Quinton Byfield, Kevin Fiala, who's going to be there for a while, Adrian Kempe is still in his prime. So getting a Charlie Trethewey as someone who I think is more NHL ready than the majority of prospects at this point would be excellent. It's a cheap contract that you could plug in a couple of years on your bottom pair, and you know what you're going to get from him. Safe, reliable defensive play that should hopefully help them get through the first round, unless of course they play Connor McDavid again. At number 25, I have the Chicago Blackhawks taking Cole Reshny from the WHL. Now, Reshny had 92 points in 62 games this season, and the reason he is this low on most draft boards is the fact that he isn't the biggest player either. He's 5'10" and 187 pounds, but again, you just take a swing on a very high upside player. He's incredibly skilled, and like I talked about earlier, you need to find more high-end forwards that could one day play alongside a Connor Bedard and give him some help in that top six. Reshny is not a guarantee to do that, but at this position in the draft, I'm not sure there is someone who has more potential to be that player than himself. Even though it's pick number 25, he instantly becomes one of their blue chip prospects of the future, and I think it's just the best value you could get at this position. Moving on to number 26, I have the Nashville Predators taking Cameron Schmidt. Now, Schmidt had 78 points in 61 WHL games this season with Vancouver. He's very high skill, the scouts love all the talent that he has, but the big knock on him is that he is 5'7" and 157 pounds as a right winger. For Nashville again, this is a high risk, high reward pick. I think learning after a guy like Jonathan Marchessault could be excellent for him, another undersized player who found a way to make things work. In terms of mentorship, I think Marchessault is probably one of the guys that could relate most to Schmidt. Now at number 27, and probably the most shocking pick I have in the first round, I have the Washington Capitals taking Jack Ivankovic from the Brampton Steelheads. Now, Ivankovic stands at 6 foot and 179 pounds, and he is a goaltender. Having a goaltender of this size selected in the first round is very rare to begin with, but I really see Ivan Kovic as someone who has a bright future in the NHL. Now, the stats won't jump off the page. He had a .903 save percentage in 43 games this season, but it was internationally where he really showed the type of goaltender he can be. With Canada at the World Juniors and the U18 Championship, he had a .961 and a .923 save percentage respectively at both of those tournaments. And according to many, he's not the top-ranked goaltender in this draft, that is Joshua Ravensbergen, but I see Ivan Kovic as having the better ceiling in the NHL, and I would expect him to be the best goaltender out of this draft as things stand right now. For the Capitals, you're so stacked at every position for the future that I thought the only area they're really lacking is in net. And while I don't think this pick is very likely, again because we very rarely see goalies selected in the first round, I think it would be more likely that they would trade down to maybe the early second round. However, since in this draft I don't have any mock trades or anything along those lines, I just have them getting their guy at number 27. And as a goalie of the future following Logan Thompson, I think it would be a very good fit. Now at number 28, I have the Winnipeg Jets taking Sasha Boudien from the NCAA. Now Boudien is a left shot defenseman standing at 6'2" and weighing 183 pounds, and he was rock solid with BU in the NCAA this year. He had 13 points in 40 games, and he really improved as the season went along. This is a swing on a high upside pick if you're Winnipeg, and it's one that I would likely see working out. If you look at the U18s, he was dynamite with Sweden getting 14 points in 7 games. And going into next season, I think he is poised to have a breakout season at the college level and could turn into an excellent prospect for the Jets. Now at number 29, I have the Carolina Hurricanes taking Braden Coots. Now Coots is a right shot centerman standing at 6 foot even and weighing 183 pounds, and he was rock solid in the WHL with Seattle this year. He had 63 points in 60 games, but just like the previous pick with Boudien, he was rock solid at the U18s with Canada, getting 12 points in 7 games. Coots screams as being a good two-way player of the future, and that's something that Carolina loves to target. I could see him one day being a Jordan Staal replacement and playing a third-line center role with the Hurricanes, and I think he is the type of prospect that Carolina just loves to select. Now at number 30, I have the San Jose Sharks taking Jack Murtaugh. Now Murtaugh is an interesting prospect. He's listed as a center, but I see him more as a winger of the future. He stands at 6'1" and 198 pounds, and he was great with the national team in the US this year, getting 53 points in 56 games. At 30th overall, I think this is just great value if you're San Jose, and you get a player who could either be a third liner, maybe a second liner if all things pan out in the future, but he's got a good skill and a good motor to go with it. And with San Jose, you get a complementary piece who will likely play in the NHL for years to come and have a solid role. At number 31, I have the Calgary Flames taking Jack Nesbitt. Now Nesbitt is a big centerman. He stands at 6'4" and 183 pounds, and he had 64 points in 65 OHL games with Windsor this season. Now with Nesbitt, you're getting a project of a player. You're hoping that he can be a great power forward that has skill at the NHL level. While I don't think he's ever going to play in a top 6, I could see him being an effective bottom 6 player of the future. You just have to hope he adds a bit of size to his frame. He's 6'4", which is great, but 183 pounds, he's not the heaviest player whatsoever. If he is able to bulk up and use that size to be an elite net front player and to be able to tip and battle away, get those garbage goals and clean up a lot of the work done by his line mates, I think he could be an effective player for sure. And to round out the draft, I have the Philadelphia Flyers selecting William Moore with the 32nd overall pick. Now Moore has some decent size as well. He's 6'2" and 174 pounds, and this is just another swing on a potential top 6 centerman of the future for Philly. He had 59 points in 64 games with the National Team Development Program last year, and he excelled at the U18s, getting 11 points in 7 games. While I would be skeptical to call him a second-line center of the future, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. However, I see him more as a middle 6 producer, maybe on the wing, or a potential third-line center of the future, which for Philly, at 32nd overall, you can't really complain. So that wraps up the first round mock draft for the 2025 NHL Draft. Let me know what you guys think down below, and if you enjoyed watching this video, I'd really appreciate it if you left it a like and subscribe to the channel.